creativity. That's good news, I think, for everybody in the room. Can AI and data make advertising smarter, better, more targeted, more valuable to the end consumer? Absolutely. I think that's a really, really important point. And data is really at the heart of this idea of marketing to a segment of one, which is where we are in 2019. So we, at the beginning of the day, I mentioned this idea that Forrester Research have, that we have evolved to this age of the customer, where empowered phonosapiens demand at an entirely new level of customer obsession. And there are 4 business imperatives for this new age of the customer. Number 1 is to turn big data into business insights. Number 2, to completely transform the CX. Another way to put that is Uberization. Think about the transformation that Uber initiated in the transportation and the taxi industry. Number 3 is to really embrace the mobile mindset. We've never had personal computers so powerful in our pocket 24/7, and people act differently on mobiles than we ever have in human history before. And number 2 is really to become a digital disruptor. And our next panel, a brilliant, brilliant subject, is really going to address several of these points, because now we have all this data and we have all this technology. What do you do with the data? How do you make better decisions? So our next panel, the title of it is Acquiring Data-Driven Decision Skills. Incredibly important, and we've got a brilliant panel of experts lined up to discuss just this topic. So ladies and gentlemen, please give a very warm, very energetic, loud welcome to our next moderator, who's going to introduce his panel from IE Exponential Learning. Please welcome to the stage, Ricardo Mesquita.
Thank you so much. Hi everyone, thank you for staying with us. I want to introduce you to the next panel on acquiring data-driven decision skills. It's a very eclectic group of people we invited, and you can join us, please. Carme, Mariana, Iván, and Ignacio, and I'll go right at it. The main debate today is how can we really become more savvy on data, and how can we acquire those skills. On my left, we have Carme Artigas. Carme was the founder until recently with Synergic Partners that was sold to Telefónica. Clearly has a huge track record, not only building her own business, but in the world of data. Thank you for coming, Carmen. On my right, I have Mariana. Mariana is Portuguese. She's an ex-L'Oreal who decided to jump ship and start her own venture. She's the co-founder and CEO of Sparkl. A business that serves women in their own homes, right? And then on my left again, I have Iván. Iván Martín is the CEO of Binfluencer, also a startup based right here in Madrid. Iván is also the academic director for the boot camps, data science boot camps at IE. So thank you for joining us. And Ignacio Larrú is the CFO of K-Fund, a very well-known VC in Spain, and he also has a lot of classroom time experience because he's one of the star teachers at IE and knows a lot about data. So as you can see, we're in for a treat. So I'll start right away with a question that how do you see acquiring data skills? I mean, is it an easy challenge or a massive ordeal? Where should people start? Anyone?
Well, I can start if you want. My experience in the class is, it's quite difficult, especially to make the transition from non-data driven, a lot of students that come with a non-data driven sector experience, making that transition, which is one of the things why we have these panels today. A lot of non-data driven functions and sectors are transitioning into being more quantitative and data driven, and that is always a challenge for students.
Okay. And is it a challenge that it's up for everyone, or do you think you need to have a specific background or mindset to actually learn data today?
Well, I think it depends on the person. It depends on what you're going to get out of it. No? I think that in data science, you can use data science or the use of data to make decisions in every industry nowadays and in every kind of job. So everything, an informed decision, if you can track some data on it and take decisions based on that, it will always try to help you. It will always help you to compare with yourself and see if you're improving, for example. No? But also, it basically depends on how much return you get out of in your specific activity, how much return you get, right? If you're working at construction, if you're actually building a building, using data there at a strategic level might be very useful, but at the construction level might not be. No? So it depends on on how much return you'll get out of it, how much interest you're going to have, and how much return you're going to get off.
I would like to add that probably now is the easiest time when people can acquire those data skills. Because I remember when I started my own company, a big data company, back to 2006, I had to build my own Synergic Academy to train our own personnel, but also our customers' skills, because there were no online courses available, no business schools providing support, not even universities. And I think we have a lot of opportunities now, self-learning, MOOCs, all the main technical and business schools can afford it, and you have many, many options. And I think there is no excuse in learning those skills today.
All right. And what were the main challenges you had? I mean, you had to set up a new venture from scratch at the time, different day and age, and as you said. What were the main challenges to create that data-driven culture?
In my own company?
Yes.
My own company was that the profession of data science didn't exist. So we had to, try and make errors and finding the right skills. Initially, we had a mixture between engineers and mathematicians, and then we had to learn by doing and understanding all the different technologies. It was a very, very hype time, so you learn machine learning of one methodology, and 6 months after, that was no longer valid, and you need to learn the next big thing. I remember Mahout, and then moving to Sparkl, and that was happening every 6 months. So it was a very important challenge to build on the right skills and have your own learning methodology. But thankfully now, it's much easier because we have a lot of experience already.
Absolutely. I saw in your background that you're a chemical engineer. Mm-hmm. How did you get into the data world? What was the driver, the trigger that made you jump and embrace that world?
Okay, it's in your blood,
Yeah.
Engineers will understand me. When you're an engineer, you like to solve, complex problems. And logical thinking and critical thinking, I think both are the key most important skills when you are approaching data science. And when we encourage children to learn code or to learn programming language, it doesn't matter what is the program language you want them to code or you want to learn, because the important thing behind is logic thinking.
Mariana, welcome to
Thank
Madrid.
you very much.
In your experience with Sparkl, what were the milestones and the metrics that you're looking into when we talk about data?
Well, at the beginning, we were flying a little bit blind because it is a service company, and we were looking or more focused in would they use these brands or the other brands because of quality. But as we were growing, we had to stop. We had to look for someone that had was data-driven, or as a data scientist that is now working with us. And she started looking at, we defined KPIs, and such as we were losing 200 services per month because we weren't forecasting like if demand exceeds or not the supply. So when we started doing that, we started growing 30% more. And this is key, and it's key on startups because it's the right environment for you to test. And startups have this ability, and they're agile to make decisions quick and move quick, rather than in a company such as a multinational that takes time turning and making decisions.
Could I ask you a question on that? So, in your experience, how useful it is to have like a data scientist role inside the startup, right? Because sometimes this data science can be applied, the same algorithms, the same things can be applied in every industry. So maybe having someone hired per hour could make more sense, because you need a consulting project. It's figure out what is my optimized way of sending emails or whatever way of sending the advertisement.
Yeah, well, in our case, I was lucky. On one hand, I'm lucky because although I'm not data-driven and I don't know how to program in Python I do have some skills because I've worked all my life in advertising, online advertising. So for that, I used to make decisions in how much I should invest or where should I invest based on data. But then again, I was lucky when I was when I became an entrepreneur, because we did an acceleration program at Beta in Portugal, and we had contact with a girl that was in operations at Beta, but also had this kind of urge of learning towards data. Then she started working at a huge startup, in data decision, in the data decision area, and she learned a lot. And then she said, Mariana, I love Sparkl, I want to work with you. So she's making both. I'm not talking about only focused data scientists, and she has a lot of other skills that helps us. And in this case, it's important that she is inside the company and not only hiring hours for her to work for us. It makes all the difference.
And Ignacio, in your experience, not only in the classroom, but as you know, in the deal flow that you get at K-Fund, how do you see the evolution of data usage? Do you see it more present in entrepreneurs and startups?
For sure. Well, every startup you receive today is data-driven, no? And customer-centered, no? And like data-driven has become in itself a label, no? That everyone wants to put on himself. It is true that in venture capital and data have a very hard relationship, because venture capital is where gut, no? The decisions is made on gut feelings, but then the data, no, can beat gut feelings, no, and back and forth. I see more data-driven startups every day because the tools are there, as Carme was mentioning. Now it's easier than ever to do it. So if you are not doing it as a founder, it's already saying something of you, no? Like if you're not data-driven in 2019,
you have a problem.
Well, it's not. You're not even trying. Huh?
Yeah. Can I just raise the question? Because I really felt it under my skin. The question is not, for me, if it's difficult or not to acquire data skills. The question for me is, are people in charge of big companies? Are people in charge of universities? Are people in charge of, I don't know, startups, understanding the importance of making decisions based on data? Because I felt this when I entered L'Oréal. I was hired to do the digital transformation, but then the guy was relieved. Okay, now I have a girl that does the data transformation. But I didn't have a team. They didn't know what to do. Data wasn't on the center of anything. They weren't even investing in advertising, and I'm talking about a huge company, okay? So mindsets also need to be changed, and it hasn't changed that much in 8 years.
Absolutely. I'd love to hear what you have to say on that, Carme. I mean, you had the experience with larger companies and corporates. How do you see them facing the challenge with data today?
Yeah, so I've been evangelizing in companies since the last 13 to 14 years, and I've had many challenges. First of all is making big companies understand that this is a strategic corporate issue. It's not just another IT project. Yep. This is a matter of strategic importance. Understanding that data is going to be the core of decision-making, but also the core and the asset of future business models. That's number one. Second is, once you have realized this, and imagine you have convinced the top management, because it's something that must be led by the top management, it must be top-down, not bottom-up. Second point is, how can we get the data? Because all the IT systems, traditional IT systems in corporate organizations, which are probably legacy systems, data is kept into silos and linked to applications. So IT ecosystems are application-centric. We need to move from application-centric to data-centric IT systems. And that's easy to say, but it doesn't happen overnight, because you need to introduce new pieces of the architecture to build your own data lake. That means to decouple data from different applications and have it available for the organization. And the third part is not only acquiring data skills, but also the cultural change. And the most important thing and the most important barrier is understanding that when you democratize access to data, indirectly, are you democratizing access to decision-making? And that is not always very well seen from hierarchical organizations. They want to keep the power of decision. So that's probably the most important resilience you may have.
Any take on that?
I teach a course in the MBA called Managing Big Data that doesn't teach any programming, doesn't teach anything related to technology, no? And a lot of students sometimes enter the course like, if we're not going to program, if we're not going to be doing the models, what are we going to be learning, no? And I always explain that in 2019, acquiring data decision-making in a company is more a managerial challenge than even a technical or a technological challenge, because everyone is data-driven until the data says something you don't want to hear. No? And that's the moment of truth of data-driven. No? If the data is always saying, no? Everyone is data-driven until you weigh yourself, no? And the scales say something you don't like, no? Then a decision has to be made. Do I throw the scale? Do I buy another scale because the scale is lying? Or do I accept the data truth and make a decision, no? And change my decisions to accommodate for that? And there's some of us that spend our whole life just changing scales, because none seem to work, no? And we go on an on-cycle, yet we believe we are super data-driven because we measure ourselves every day. That's not, that's not the requirement. The moment of truth is when the data says something that goes against your intuition, are you willing? What are you going to choose? And that's, and itself is a managerial challenge.
Sacrifice your own judgment process.
Which is very difficult if you've been making decisions. I consult in professional sports teams. If you've been told for 20 years you are the best, you were the best in your neighborhood, the best in your city, the best in your state, the best in your country, no? And you are ranked X in the ATP, and suddenly here comes this guy that, of course, you don't respect because he couldn't hit a ball, no? That obviously has not played tennis in his life professionally, and says that the computer says you are serving inefficiently. Do you embrace it, or do you say, I don't take advice from someone that hasn't been a professional tennis player? That's the difference between being data-driven and being data-flooded.
So it's also a matter of changing mindsets and the way we approach that, right?
100%.
Where are we now? I mean, we're in Spain. How do you think companies and professionals are facing this data transformation? Do you think they're embracing it, they're fast, they're slow? What rhythm are we at?
I think that, I mean, Spanish organizations, in Spain we have quite a good and powerful education system that has allowed to have a lot of engineers that can all work in this environment and understand, as you were saying, as an engineer, you always expect some kind of data to be able to take the decision. And I think so big organizations and smaller organizations are all flooded with engineers, which require this process of understanding. But I believe that, as Ignacio was saying, in bigger organizations, it's extremely hard to change the mindset and the management style as well. So it's not what the boss says anymore. It's let's prove if what the boss says is true or not. I think that in my case, so as an entrepreneur, in our own startup, we have to actually wait for the data to come out before we actually invest that way. No? So we have, let's do a small test. Let's try with 100 users, 100 influencers in our case. If data proves what we thought it would be, then we keep on investing. If not, we stay away from that. And then, as you were saying, if you don't like it, then what do you do? Well, that's intuition, and let's keep on trying. Ask experts to try to see what's the next test. But I think that the hardest part is this change of mindset and this new direction of waiting for data to prove you wrong before you actually move on.
I think there are like two dimensions and two speeds. So on one side we have big companies that are acquiring data-driven skills and a data-driven mindset, and I've seen that progressing a lot, very positively, in the last 10 years, of course. And I would say that almost all IBEX 35 companies are engaged in data transformational projects, and they have data-driven skills in their company. But they use that dimension to improve their current business, to improve decision-making, to improve new revenue streams, or to make better operational efficiency gains. But on the other hand, you have the digital natives and the new startups and companies like Mariana's companies that are native data companies. And they're using data not to improve an existing business and make it more operational efficient, but it's to make a business model. Mm-hmm. So it's a data company because the business model is on data. And that is where I don't see big companies, and I see a lot of startups starting to understand that data is the new raw material for business, but the problem in Spain, as always, is a problem of scaling up. And the challenge we have, and I think the good opportunity to be here at South Summit, is to make understand that this is a global business, and that you're not competing against your neighbor, you're competing with all the world. Oh. So that's the challenge you have, the challenge of scaling up. And that's only possible when you are a new company, a startup. Big companies are not very good at disrupting themselves.
So we're talking here about acquiring data skills. So should we focus? Should it be on us, everyone in the room, to start and ignite their own interest and learning process on data, or should be companies pushing forward to try to achieve what you were saying? Who starts and who follows?
I believe it's a dual force, no? In the sense that I teach in the law school. No? Imagine in the law school, if you teach a data no, a data proficiency course. Now IE has like a horizontal modules that is taught in. And imagine the way lawyers or aspiring lawyers receive a data processing course. It's why do I need this? And I always say the same. You can run from maths, you can run from data, but you cannot hide. No? And data will be there waiting for you, and the fact that you ignore them doesn't mean they're going to ignore you. It's like, okay, if this sector ignores data, the data will ignore that sector. No, it's a matter of time that someone like Mariana decides to start a business, and suddenly someone will change the underlying way you operate. And the companies also, out of desperation or out of need, are also pushing for repurpose and retooling, because we were mentioning, we are changing the way companies operate. You also have to retool the personnel that operates, because if not, you can change the processes, but if you don't change the people's skills and abilities, that change will not be lasting.
Actually, specifically in IE, exactly, we get a lot of students that come directly from the company. The company is directly sending a full team. I send you this full team to learn all of the data science skills in our bootcamp, for example. And the same thing applies for the person asking us, are people leaving their own companies for a short period. It's an 11-week program, right? So they leave their company, come to Spain, do the whole program, and go back to the same company to just, it's themselves leaving their own job and risking the company saying, okay, I don't want you back, or something like that, just because they can't develop themselves, and it sometimes happens as well that they don't end up coming back to the same company, they just switch and go to a new place. A company that adapts more to their own needs.
I mean, you were saying something that it's, what I've seen, we've been seeing in the past couple of years is that we get a lot of profiles that are highly analytical, strong maths and stats, a lot of them with a background in STEM. So for those in the room who do not have that level of background, is it a barrier for you to actually get those skills and do the reskilling, or is it a matter of effort? Is it a matter of commitment, discipline? How do you see that?
I would say that, first of all, everybody will have to be data literate. So not everybody needs to become a data scientist, an artificial intelligence expert, but all of us in any profession, and of course all our kids and all the existing professions, need to understand data as they understand the alphabet. They need to make decisions based on data. A doctor will have to work with a robot or an AI to make a diagnosis on cancer, and also a lawyer needs to understand an algorithm to predict the rate of success, and also journalists are being disrupted by robot journalists that are writing the news better than them. So that's something that is not optional. Coming from a non-scientific background, it doesn't mean that you don't have options. At the other way around, I would say that nowadays the difference between science and we call it arts has disappeared, has blurred. And I would say that at the very beginning I had a team just for pure mathematicians and engineers. And later on, I was acquiring more talent in the social sciences. So ethnographers, people from linguistics. And I remember that when you were studying maths or linguistics and your parents' friends say, oh, sorry, your son is studying maths. He only can become a secondary school teacher, or your daughter is studying languages, so she can only be translator. No? Now there's a rise of all these also social sciences, because all the interfaces in the future will be human-machine, and that is where we need the qualitative side. You can tell what is a percentage that somebody is churning to your competitor, but a mathematician doesn't understand why, while a person from social sciences understands why, because understands the customer behavior. So I would encourage people from social science to acquire data literacy, understanding basic, I would say, statistic packages, and one thing that's very important, data visualization skills.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're seeing a lot of people transitioning from, we get a lot of PhDs in statistics, maths, that are transitioning from the academic sector and want to get into the private sector. So they use sort of a segue to learn a new language, programming language, and they can find a new challenge, right? Professional challenges. So if any of us here were curious to know if we had to give the first steps to actually acquiring data skills, where would you start? Would you do it, with others? Would you do it on your own online? Where would you start? Just a tip for the audience.
I can start,
okay.
Because I'm the one that has less experience. So I started learning a lot online.
Okay.
And then now I'm starting looking at courses such as boot camps, part-time, that you can take after work. And doesn't mean you need to be like 1 year or 2 years or 3 years taking an MBA on this, but at least you can start gaining some skills for management, as you told us before. I've read a study that touched me a lot. I've heard about it as well before from McKinsey, that they concluded that 70% of the companies that wanted to do the digital transformation failed. And I'm going to press the same button again, but we need to never stop learning. You don't have an MBA and it's done. You don't have a course and it's done. You need to keep on learning. And I see that a lot at home. My husband is a doctor. They never stop studying. They need to continue studying. So this is one of the key messages that you need to be curious if you want to follow the journey that's happening, and you need to never stop learning.
I've been at IE for 8 years now, no? Which I always say IE is like a hotel, in the sense that the professors stay, but every you see the same cycle, no? In the hotels is a week cycle, in IE is 1 year, but you see, and being a man of data and science, I'm always very curious about trying to predict future success with my students. No? In the class, you're looking at them and you're trying to see, you know that out of these 60 or 70, X will be successful. Unfortunately, you don't know which ones, because if not, I would be a headhunter. No? But and also, I always treat them like subjects in an experiment. And after years, and I've been trying to analyze. Okay, is it rich versus poor? Is it grades? No, is it no? And I've only came after 7 years of analysis. I can only identify 2 common traits in those that after 3 or 4 years are here versus the ones that are not. And the first one, and this has not been prepared, but it's actually curious. The curious student always performs better long-term than the non-curious. As a professor, you don't like him, because the curious student is always more demanding and more, so you try to develop some hate but to him, but it's in the long term, it plays better. And the second, if you want to predict the success of a student, you have to meet them the day of the graduation, when they are graduating from the program. If they have, and it's what Mariana was saying, if they have the feeling of this is the end of the journey, game over. It's over. No? Sometimes the students say, finally, like I reached the goal, and they are like exhausted, but they have the feeling of I've finished the race. No, where's my money? And there's another group of students that the day of the graduation have the attitude of this is the start of the journey. Like I've been preparing, and this is where the good stuff. And those students, so if you take those students plus the curious ones, and if you can find the fit, that's what I would put my money on.
All right. Very good.
So
one tool, yeah.
Yeah. So what I would say is starting by your own. No, the original question was starting by your own or doing it by following some kind of course or online. I'd say that there is one thing which is interesting that happens, I would say, specifically in technical profiles or non-technical profiles that go into technical fields, which is more the data-driven decision processes, is that there is a huge insecurity inside you. It's do I know enough? No? That's a continuous question you have throughout all the way. And you always have you keep on having this question of, I'm sure that there is someone that does it better than me. So do I know enough? Should I learn more? Should I study further? So one thing that I would advise, because I've seen also quite a few students pass through my classes, is to look for a structure that will help you see how filled you are in those environments. And you were saying, for example, in visualization. Visualization is very important. There are thousands of tools to visualize data, but choose like a syllabus. Find your own syllabus. Try something that this is what I want to achieve out of my learning, and then like follow it. You can do that by, of course, following an outside course that will do the syllabus for you, or you can do it internally by yourself, or asking some friends or experts. But close your syllabus so that you don't always forever feel that you don't know enough. Because it's something that happens to everyone. Nobody admits it. Everyone feels like, oh, I know so much. But the reality is that everyone is in this insecure cycle where they're trying to figure out everything they're doing, and there is always someone else that knows more than me.
But also because it's evolving, right?
Yep, exactly.
You need to continue learning because you need to be updated.
Mm-hmm.
So I would agree that the learning is a lifelong journey, and everyone must be responsible for that journey. You cannot expect the company to support us on all our training needs. Company will support you on the training the skills that the company is interested in, but you need to have to take the responsibility, and you have, as you see, many options. Don't forget that we are in a global talent war. There's a talent war at a global scale. There is not enough data science or data skilled people in the world. It's not enough to cover all the needs that we'll have in the future, assuming that all the universities in the world will stop their programs and just train data science. So necessarily, we need to upskill the existing labor force. So that's a mantra. The second one is that depending on your interest, if you want to really become a very skilled data scientist or an AI developer, or you want to become a business leader or a manager, able to make decisions based on data, the building blocks are different. But once you gain those building blocks, as you said, and I recommend that you start from something very simple, acquiring basic skills, you very soon as possible, you dive into real data. And you dive into real data problems. And that's what I recommend, to go for a data bootcamp or find some friends to join a datathon. You're not going to win it the first time, but the importance is to understand how you need to work with huge amounts of data, because you expect that you get there and start modeling. And no, 80% of your time will be cleansing data, preparing data, structuring data. That's a hard job. And if you are not understanding this, you will never be able to get to the next step.
Thank you, Carme. So we're out of time. Love the conversation. Thank you so much for coming. Iván, Carme, Mariana, Ignacio. A quick message out there. I mean, never stop learning is probably what I stayed with. Remain curious. The end is not it's the beginning of the journey. There will always be demand for data, so we should all have some level of data knowledge. So I hope you go out there and learn, be that online, Coursera, whatever you choose as a tool, but learn, all right? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful.